Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are listening from and on whatever platform you're listening on. Your support in listening and sharing this podcast, it is so greatly appreciated. Now, today's topic is one that we all think about and we reflect on as coaches because we are going to be talking about leadership and we are going to be talking about developing leaders. I know as coaches, we always want to bring leadership qualities out of our players and empower them with the confidence to lead. And so we're going to talk about the art of teaching leadership, demonstrating leadership, and even trying to bring that leadership out of our perhaps more reluctant players who aren't necessarily the most willing to be leaders. So to help discuss this topic, I'm very happy to be joined by Coach Shelby Gliebe. Coach, how are you today?
I am great. How are you?
I am doing quite well, and thank you for hopping on to talk about this topic. I know as coaches are always looking for leaders and ways to bring the leadership out of their players, so really looking forward to getting into this. So let's go ahead and start with introduction to you, Coach, where basketball's taken you, where coaching's taken you, where you're currently at right now.
Okay. So I am from a small town in Indiana, and then I had a basketball scholarship to Maryville University in St. Louis. Lived out there for a while, and I was a skill development coach with the Larry Hughes Basketball Academy. And then I also coached an 8th grade team, like a local team there. When my now husband and I moved back here to Indiana, I helped out a local school just when I could, really, and then coached their 8th grade team, and then got my first varsity head coaching position last season and walked into a team that they had been 0-40, and then, we won 4 games. So that was pretty big. And then that was a 2A school. And then the job that I have now, I'm at New Albany High School, which is in New Albany, Indiana, teaching, and I'm the head coach there. So, and that's a 4A school. So had a quick journey, but very fortunate to, be where I'm at now. So.
Well, you've put a lot into that journey, though. There's been steps along the way, a lot of different opportunities that you've had along the way, and as you kind of mentioned about the previous school that you were at, taking that from 0 to 4 wins, that's still a huge accomplishment, and that's still something I'm sure to be proud of, and they were happy to see some success in that way for sure. Yep. And so you mentioned about you being a teacher, and I know a lot of the people who are listening, who are coaches, are also teachers as well. And so I want to touch on that with you. And I myself am also a teacher. So I want to talk about how being a teacher, how that's affected your coaching. I know that we can learn a lot from playing the game, but what has being a teacher done to help you become a better coach?
Yeah, so I'll be completely honest. I never really wanted to be in the classroom. It wasn't I didn't get a degree in teaching or anything. And, once you get into high school coaching, it just, kind of comes with it. So I actually just started teaching last year, and, they were like, well, we have a teaching position open. Would you want to do it? And I was like, sure, I'll add that to the resume. Why not? But, just being in it, like I said, I never thought I wanted to be a teacher, but now that I am, it gives you a whole nother, I guess, side of the athletes that you have. And it helps to build better relationships. I'm a big person on building relationships. So, it's really cool to be able to see them in the hallways, or, another teacher walks by and say, oh, so-and-so, they were awesome in class today. Just being able to build those relationships, not only with the kids, but also other teachers, and kind of build that support system around the girls and then your program. It's really kind of opened my eyes to that.
And I can imagine that for the players too, that they just like having their coach around. They like knowing that they're in the building, that they know that they're available, or they might see them out in the hallway. And I think it helps for those coaches who are teachers. It really kind of makes you feel a little bit more ingrained in the school culture and in the environment. And like you said, you get to kind of see a different side of them and see the way that they act, for better or for worse, in the
Right.
hallways, or the way that
Yep.
they conduct themselves in school. And so it is really interesting to see the student part in the student athlete life, if you're in the teaching realm and in the coaching realm. So
Yep.
I have to ask to follow up on that, because teaching as well as coaching is really the only professions that I've had. So when you started teaching last year, what did you find as the biggest like culture shock or adjustment for getting into the classroom?
There really wasn't a lot. So, I mean, there is, but my biggest thing, and when I started last year, the principal, he was like, just because you didn't go to through the teaching program, the same principles you build your team on are the same principles you control your classroom. There's, communication, there's trust, all those types of things. So I really tried to lean on, how am I as a coach, and kind of transfer that into the classroom. And I really did catch myself sometimes. I'd be like, okay, I actually need to like teach something today, not just like sit and talk and get to know the kids, which I think they enjoy. But at times I was like, all right, I need to actually like accomplish something today, education wise, instead of talking about their backgrounds and things like that. So that was probably the hardest, is okay, I actually have to teach them things. I mean, I know that's the whole point of being a teacher, but I just really like talking to people and learning their stories. So that was probably the biggest thing.
Well, and those kids won't stop you from talking. If you just want to
No,
talk and
they
you just want to listen, and or they just want to listen and they'll talk, trust me, they're not going to
right,
stop you to be like, oh, we really want to learn right now.
right, right.
But no, I mean, it's great about building relationships though. And I mean, really, that's whether it's coaching or teaching. I think the relationships that you build with your players or with your students, those are the things that are long lasting. Those are the things that will set great, just things for your program, just great reputation for your program when they'll see how positive it is and how great the relationships are. And so, yeah, I completely agree with the transferable skills that exist within coaching and with teaching.
Yep.
So as we kind of get into our topic now about the concept of developing leaders and bringing the leadership out of players, I want to talk about you on a personal experience with your own basketball experience and your playing of basketball. Did you consider yourself personally to be as a leader when you played basketball? Was it something that was brought out of you? Did you find that was something that you always had within you? I'm just curious about your own personal experience first.
I believe that I was always just kind of a natural born leader. I always was the type of player and the type of person, going through high school and in college. Like, I wanted to put the team on my back, put me in a situation where, I have to knock down the free throws and I'll do it. Or, put me on the guy or the woman, whatever, that I need to stop, and I'll do that. So I've always been a leader, and, sometimes maybe a little too vocal as a leader, but I was always, I made a point to make sure nobody beat me in the sprint. I wanted to set that example. No, a leader, I'm a point guard. I'm going to command the floor. I'm the floor general. So I'm not going to lead from the back. I'm going to lead from the front. So that was just always kind of my mentality as, a leader and a point guard.
Well, I think that the idea, like you said, of kind of leading from the front, leading by example, that probably helps a lot in being seen as a leader. And I'm sure we'll get into that, your actions as well as the things that you say, as if both of them line up and both of them are similar, then it's probably a lot easier for people to see that leadership when they see it in actions as well as words.
Yep.
So now that you're in that position of coaching, and now that you're coaching leaders yourself on the basketball court, to start off with, what characteristics do you look for that help you identify that, oh, I know that person's going to be a leader, or I know that person has leadership qualities that I need to bring out in them?
Yeah. So some of the big ones, and I made some notes, so hopefully I don't get too jumbled up here.
It's all good.
One of the big things that I kind of see, especially in high school girls, some of them, like you said earlier, are kind of reluctant to be leaders. But one of the biggest ones I look for is, having a sense of urgency about themselves. A lot of kids these days, not all of them, but a lot of them they feel entitled, and I talk to them all the time, playing basketball is a privilege. It is not a right. So, I look for, the athlete that's going to walk in the gym with a sense of urgency to be in there. They're not going to stroll in and, put their shoes on slowly. So I, notice those types of things right off the bat. Probably, they're enthusiastic to be there. They enjoy being there. I was never a big practice person. I would rather just play games, but, I try to be as enthusiastic as possible. I was always the one, giving the most high fives and talking the most, helping my teammates, if something, I probably could help a little more, but something I look for in my teammate or in my girls now is, which girl is going to help a newcomer, understand what we're doing. So those are some things, I guess, that I look for personally.
So I'm really curious because of the experience that you mentioned earlier about the team that you took over previously that hadn't had a lot of success. When you were in that particular program, I know that if a program isn't that successful and some of the players in that program aren't necessarily used to being successful, that sense of urgency could be lacking, or they could just kind of be down on themselves, and there's not perhaps a lot of that excitement or urgency. Was that something that you noticed when you were in that program? Did you still see players who had that leadership in them and were urgent, were excited, and were all gung-ho? I'm just curious about that experience, considering this unique circumstance that school was in.
Yeah. So that one is extremely unique, and I commend, all the girls that were on the team and in the program, because, they weren't getting beat, 1 and 2 points every game. They were getting blown out by 50 plus points every game. So, I tried to look at it. I didn't really look at a ton of scores and score books and things like that, because I wanted to have my own idea of them. And as soon as I took the job over, they were like, when can we get in the gym? And, for them to still have that sense of urgency to still, to get beat by 40 points, but then still want to come to open gym and then put more time in. I was extremely impressed by that, because honestly, I probably would not have been like that. And leadership wise, I mean, they didn't really know how to be leaders. They had never really been taught, how to be leaders or how to bring out those qualities. But, as the season went on, different players kind of realized their role. And a lot of them, they weren't necessarily vocal leaders, but a few of them were, they led by example. They were putting in the time after. They were, calling me about, okay, what can I do better, and things like that. So there was a little bit of a sense of urgency, but, at the same time, I don't really know if they didn't really know anything. I mean, not to take anything away from them, but, and then, for them to welcome me, I was actually I think the fourth coach in 4 years that they had. So for them to welcome me and, take on a new system and a new coaching style, they handled it well. So it was interesting, to say the least.
Well, I think then that kind of speaks to, at least for that circumstance, at least that they still loved playing basketball. They probably still loved being around each other. They probably still like the teamwork and the camaraderie and just the process of getting better, which I think is incredibly important to just always try to improve. And like you said, if you might not be looking at the scoreboard necessarily to judge, success, but incrementally you saw success and you saw them, still keep working hard. And like you said, demonstrating that leadership by example and through the things that they do. And I think that one of the things that we're kind of getting at, and I'll have you kind of re-emphasize this if I'm correct, is that a lot of the qualities and the things that you're identifying in terms of leadership really don't have anything to do with basketball skills. Am I kind of correct in thinking that?
Yep, absolutely.
So you're looking at more of those, if we're looking at more of those intangible things, those things that aren't necessarily basketball skills, then that leads me to also think that the leaders that exist on your team don't necessarily have to be the best basketball players. Is that kind of been the experience? How does that kind of work in terms of the leadership and how it relates to their on-court performance?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously helps if they're good.
Right?
Um, but no, I've always kind of been, and, if you would have asked me this 5 years ago, I probably would have been like, oh my gosh, just need them all to drop 20 points, whatever. But now I'm, after you play and you go through it and things, you start to realize, in your jobs now, how important the little things, the intangible things that you learn through sports. And, for me, through basketball are so much more important than, how many points I scored. So those are the things I always try to look for, the qualities that, are going to be the things that put them into leadership positions, after high school and things like that. So those are the qualities. And that's just I'm very big on character development, more so than, obviously we do basketball, but, I'm looking to teach, and this was something I was going to talk about later on, but, I teach through basketball, not for basketball. So one of my old friends used to say, if they say it's just a game, then why is everybody so concerned with the game, when we should be teaching these kids through the game, not for the game. So that's just kind of stuck with me, because I know now how important the things that I learned through basketball have helped me, become a head coach now, or a teacher, and things like that. So it's definitely the intangible things, outside of, scoring 20 points a night. So, yep.
But both of them are nice. You can score
Yeah,
20 points and be a
absolutely.
leader. Hey,
Yeah.
I'll take that too. But no, you and I are 100% in line with that process of, me, and sounds like you as well. I'm just teaching a bunch of life skills and a bunch of things that they get to use, but I just get to teach it through basketball. So,
Yeah,
that's the best of both worlds. I can teach you all these things about leadership, determination, perseverance, hopefully all these other great things, but we get to do it for a basketball game. So to me, that's the best thing ever. It's the best
absolutely.
possible platform for you all to learn that skill.
Yeah.
Now, as we know, and as you have mentioned, that many of our young athletes need to be taught how to be a leader. And so for you, do you find yourself, either now or in your previous positions, do you find yourself having to almost teach and model that process so that your girls understand what leadership looks like?
Yes. Anybody will say, you can't walk the walk or you can't talk the talk if you don't walk the walk. So, my biggest things, with coaching is communication. And, I talk to the team all the time, if you can't communicate, then you can't be on the floor. You can't leave your teammates, hanging high and dry on a screen and get their back broke, just different things like that. So when we talk about communication, I over communicate, because, I want them to think, I want them to see, oh, okay, well, coach communicates all the time, so that's what she means. Or, it takes a little bit. And sometimes the girls, if you talk to a kid, you find a kid that you see these leadership qualities in, it's almost embarrassing for them. If you talk to them, you're like, hey, I really think you have the characteristics and, the behaviors and things to be a really great leader someday. They almost get embarrassed.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, and I don't know if it's because they have, the wrong idea of what a leader is, if they just think it's like this bossy person, I don't know. But yeah, that's the biggest thing. And with my coaching staff too, I tell them all the time, like, we can't tell them to be these things, or, we can't tell the leaders to act like this or like that if we're not going to do the same thing. So, just as I hold the girls accountable to how they behave and things like that, I also hold the coaching staff to those as well. So, if we can't model it, we're not setting the precedent for our program to build that, culture around that. So.
And when it comes to modeling, are there certain behaviors or certain characteristics that when you're modeling them, that you really think about and you're really like being self-aware about? Like, I know for me as a coach, one of mine is like being on time, but
Mhm.
I know I have to think a lot about, okay, I know school just got out, I have X amount of minutes, but all right, if I want to, preach being on time, I got to make sure, like, as best as I can, that I'm out there and I'm being on time. And I know that another one for me is about, just the general and the respect, and then respecting, the officials and respecting the other team, so on and so forth, which means I have to do that in the way that I behave and the way I conduct myself. So are there certain things that you really have to like reflect on, or maybe ways that you've had to like improve a little bit so that you're modeling those characteristics for your girls?
Yeah, probably the biggest one. And, if you probably ask my teammates, they were probably like, gosh, she was such a B, just the way I talked to, like, I was never like negative. I talked at people, not to them. And so that's probably my biggest thing now is, and I actually, my little sister, she's helping me coach, and we were, doing a drill the other night, and she corrected them on something, and I was like, Kelsey, you can't talk at them, you have to talk to them. And she's like, oh shoot, my bad. So that's probably the biggest thing is, taking a breath and not reacting, just, talking to them. I would have been 1,000 times better of a leader had I learned that back when I was playing. If I want something corrected or whatever, I need to talk to people, not talk at them. So that's probably my biggest thing. If I see something or, get frustrated about something, I'm like, okay, take a breath, talk to them, not at them, and just watch the tone of your voice.
Well, I think the tone of your voice part that you mentioned is really key, because I don't know about you, but I know for me, when I see something, it immediately sparks a thought or something in my mind that I immediately want to get out, and like
Mhm.
immediately I want to say what it is that's on my mind. But I know that it might not come across the way that I want it to, or they might not take it the way I want it to. I'm pretty fortunate now in my situation that some of my girls, they've been with me a while, that they kind of know the way I communicate, but still, some things are best left either in your head or probably filtered a little bit, and made
Yeah.
sure that they're communicated the right way. And that actually leads to a follow-up question about something that you mentioned earlier about the process of over communicating. So I'm just curious about what that means to you and your staff. So you're demonstrating this leadership quality of communication, and then you mentioned how you almost purposefully over communicate. Are there specific like instances or examples when you're intentionally over communicating to your girls?
Probably off court, actually. Just, in our group chat, just constantly, and they probably get annoying. They probably muted the notifications by now, but, just checking in and letting them know, like, hey, hope you all are having a great day. You all did awesome last night. Let's get back after it tonight, or, just something like that. So just always communicating. We have an app for our schedule. I printed out schedules, like, just making sure that everybody's on the same page, and just letting them always know that, I don't mind surprises, but, I like to know what's going on, because, I can't coach them effectively if I don't know what's going on. So
Right.
that's my big thing. Like, hey, I'll tell you, I come in, I'll be like, hey, I'm not having a great day today, but I'm not going to take it out on you girls. So just always being open and honest, when something's going on, and not trying to act like I'm this, person that has no issues or feelings or anything, like I'm this stone cold person. So just really letting them know, like, hey, life right now is tough for a lot of people. We've been in this pandemic and whatever. So just being real and open, and really, like I said, just over communicating.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt for your players to see you as a human being and to actually see you as a person with feelings and thoughts and
Yeah.
emotions. And
Yeah.
I know that I've even had students of mine who will joke if I ever mention about like having interests outside of teaching and coaching, as if like that is my whole existence and that's all I
Right.
ever do. But it helps them, I think, to kind of see you that way and know that, like to a certain extent that you'll share with them, like, hey, like I'm feeling sick, or hey, like this happened and I might be a little off right now. And
Mhm.
if you have a good relationship with your players, they'll respect that, and they should be able to understand and work with that. And with that communication piece, and with those positive messages, or the ways that you communicate, or the ways that you kind of say like, hey, like you did a great job, girls, like let's keep at it, and things like that. Are those things that you would intentionally like teach for certain players, to like, hey, I want you to be that type of person for the team, and say those things as well, and encourage them and communicate positively off the court, and kind of, pump them up that way? Or is that not something that you're too worried about in terms of like the leaders on your team and the responsibilities you want them to have?
I would say it definitely is. And more so, and you probably know whenever, if you played and things like that, there was always that one person that, if something happened or something went wrong, you would look to that person and be like, okay, what are they doing right now? Because whatever they're doing, I need to do. So, just if, we have whatever age they're in, if, you see somebody get down, you know, for those leaders to pick them up and just, hey, it's all right, get the next one or something like that. Like, I just think it builds a camaraderie and, lets kids know like, okay, my leader is, instilling some confidence in me. So it I don't want them to be fake about it by any means, but it's definitely important for them to, if they are the people or the person that some athletes look to, for them to be able to say, hey, good job, great job tonight, or, come back tomorrow and we'll get after it or something like that. So, I mean, it's not something I'm harping on them to do, but it's definitely something that I think helps build that team dynamic and things like that.
Well, absolutely, I 100% agree with that. I think that you bring up a really good point, and that might be even something for coaches to consider when they're looking at film. Is when there is like a foul, or there is some sort of break in the action or something, where the girls or the guys are looking to somebody, like who do they look to, like who are they looking at? It's one thing to look at the coach if the coach is saying something, but if that isn't happening, like who are the players, who do they turn to, who's speaking up, who do they go to? Like it might give you some insight as to who the players on your team are relying on, or who they're looking for like some guidance or for some sort of direction. It might just be like a quick glance at a player, but even that would be like, okay, so I know when this happens, they're looking to so and so to
Yep.
say something or give some reassurance, and it could be useful information. I think that's a good thing to consider.
Yep.
Now, in a perfect world, all of our leaders that we identify are going to be leaders, and they're gonna take the mantle and be perfectly okay with leadership, because we told them we need them to be. But unfortunately, that is not the world that we live in, and sometimes we have players who we see leadership qualities in, but they are resistant, or they don't really want to be a leader for one way or the other. So for you, what is that process like for you to kind of bring that out of them? I guess there's going to be two parts to this question. So we'll start with the first part. The one who maybe has that quality in them, but for whatever reason, they're reluctant, or they're shy, or they're nervous, and they don't really have the confidence in themselves to do it. How do you kind of go about slowly bringing those leadership qualities out of them?
Well, I will definitely, and I think there's two types of leaders. I mean, I think, if you have a player that, can lead vocally, but also lead by example, I think that's
Hmm.
obviously the way you want. But, there are athletes that are shy and they don't want the pressure. So, if they're reluctant to kind of take on the role, if I see something happen, just kind of how we talked, well, so and so looked to you when it went badly, or, showing them in film, just like we just talked about, hey, when this happened in the game, these girls looked at you. Like, So just kind of showing them like, oh, okay, like it doesn't have to be, this thing where you have to be this vocal cheerleader and whatever. It's, they look at you because you have a sense of calmness about yourself. So just kind of showing them examples, or, in practice, if, a youngster comes up to them and asks a question like, hey, they look to you as a leader. That's why they came to you. They trust you, they look up to you, different things like that. So just kind of, I guess, giving them little nuggets or little tidbits of, hey, that's why I think you're a leader. That's why we see these leadership qualities in you, is because of these little examples right here.
And in your experience with those players, what have you found maybe the barrier that you've had to break through with those players? Do you think it's just a lack of confidence, shyness, combination? What sort of factors do you think you've had to sort of break down, or barriers you've had to break down in order to kind of bring that out of them?
I really think it is confidence. And I'm sure there's other things as well, but I would probably, if I had to, take a survey or whatever, it would be confidence over and over again. Just, think about, teenage girls, or, even teenage boys. Just, I mean, I know boys are a little more confident than girls are, but
Maybe too
girls are,
much so.
yeah, right. But girls, they just lack so much confidence. Why? I have no idea. But, that is probably the hardest thing, of just building them up, and I'm not a negative coach. I try to always coach them through things, but, just building them up and, letting them know that, they're great, or whatever it is. But I would probably say confidence is the biggest barrier between, a leader being a leader.
And well, I completely agree with that, because I've seen that as well, and I've coached before for years at middle school too, and oh boy, it exists there, especially out in middle school, but in high school too, and I think what you brought up is a good point about the fact that the confidence, it wavers and it goes up and down, and there's some days that are better than others, and as a coach, if I, say something to bring out some leadership and pump up a player and encourage them one day, like they might have a down day the next day, and it's a continual process. And so you have to be consistent about it, and really keep encouraging and keep being positive with them. And I think that one of the things I know for me personally, is that really isn't the biggest strength of my personality. It's not that I'm not a positive person, but I know I personally am not like the biggest, like, rah, rah, going to give you confidence type person. But I think I've learned I have to, for certain players, be that person if I want them to, be leaders, or I want to really get them to where I need them to be. And so it seems like it's important for coaches to maybe realize that the way you have to communicate with players to get what you want out of them might have to involve stepping outside of who you even normally are as a person, and kind of meeting them where they're at. And maybe that was something that you kind of dealt with, because I don't know if you lacked much confidence when you were playing, or if that's something that you had to sort of think about in order to, instill that confidence to them.
Yeah. And I really think you hit the nail on the head with, you have to know, who you're talking to. And that's probably the biggest thing that I see coaches struggle with, or, players stop playing, is because their coach didn't coach them the way they needed to be coached, or didn't talk to them how they personally wanted to be talked. Coaching and developing people and leading is it's not a cookie cutter thing, and as coaches, we have to be, especially now that we know the global pandemic, we have to be flexible, and you have to, like you said, step out of your comfort zone as a leader. And I think that's probably the biggest thing is, when you're trying to develop leaders and communicators and things, you have to know, I know it's a lot, you're teaching and, dealing with basketball as well, but you have to be able to look at each player as an individual instead of, as a whole group. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is just being able to recognize, who needs to be coached differently and different things like that. So.
And I think exactly with what you said, it really does tie also into the relationships that you build and the trust that you build within your team, so that your players understand why you're talking maybe to one player differently than you talk to the other, and they don't think like, oh, they're being unfair, or not treating each other equally.
Yep.
Well, no, I'm not treating all of you equally. I'm treating you
Yeah.
fairly and treating you the way that, like, I know I need to communicate and I know I need to talk with you. And having that trust between your players, and so that they understand, oh, like, coach is talking to this person, they pulled this player aside because that's how they need to be talked to, versus, me, like, you can just yell at me in front of everyone and I don't care.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but yeah, just understanding that.
Yeah.
Now on the other end, I don't know if you've had experience with this or not. Have you been in situations with players who either maybe thought they were leaders but they really weren't, or maybe players who like looked up to somebody as a leader but that player really wasn't the type of leader that you wanted them to be looking up to? Have you had experiences with I'd hate to say the term the wrong leader, but I guess I will. Have you had experiences with that?
Yeah. And like you said, you hate to say, wrong leader, but, it's just kind of like, man, I don't want you looking at them for that, they don't know what they're doing. But yeah. And really, I mean, it's hard. It's kind of a sticky situation to be in, because, you don't want to go to that girl and say, hey, well, you can't look at them for a leader because they don't know what the heck they're doing, or, whatever it is. But I think it's kind of going to that person and just saying, hey, I know you look to her as a leader for this or whatever. However, maybe also, watch so-and-so and how they do it, or how they react to different situations. Just, not to where you're not discouraging them from looking to that person, because if they're confident and, they trust that person for whatever reason, it's fine. But, I think in my experience, I've probably just been like, hey, also watch this person or model what this person's doing. I try not to discourage it, because then they're like, well, coach was talking about blah, 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 or, you don't want to start any of that. So probably just encouraging them to, lean on other players as well as the one they already feel confident in.
Well, that really kind of ties back into what we talked about being positive, and the way that you frame your statements and the way that you have those conversations. So then it seems like what might be most effective in those situations is if, you have a lot of, your team who's looking up to player A, but you really want them to focus on player B. I think that as a coach, if you're consistently being positive about player B and talking about all the great things that player B is doing, and hey, if you want to player B, successful, or whatever the case may be, like, you should model what player B is doing. I think the message will get across, without you being negative and necessarily saying anything bad about, player A in that example. It kind of frames it definitely in a more positive manner. And so with that, to kind of follow up with that, have you then had to have conversations with that player, and have you had to like tell them like, hey, you're not really demonstrating these leadership qualities that you think you are, or hey, these players are looking up to you but you're demonstrating X, Y, and Z on the court, and that's not what we want to have happen? Have you had those type of conversations with those players?
Yes. And, again, I try to be positive and frame everything to where it's not tearing kids completely down, but I'm also going to be completely honest with them as well. So, I had a couple players, actually an example last year, these girls had really never been taught anything. And, they had kind of had the stigma of, well, you get them down, then, all heck is going to break loose. They'll start punching and whatever. And I hadn't seen it until this one game, and I don't know what was going on, but, we had a player in the JV game slap the opponent. And then in the varsity game, one of the senior leaders, she actually got frustrated and like hit a girl too. So,
Wow.
when I looked at her, I was like, hey, look, you're a leader and I have to have you on the floor. However, I can't have you acting like this, you know, I mean, we can't build a program with our senior leader acting like this on the floor. And you can't expect, you know, these young players to want to be in the program and build this awesome program if this is how you're acting and behaving. So, you know, as much as I am, you know, positive, I was like, look, we can't be acting like this on the floor. You know, just because you get frustrated doesn't mean we have to act like hoodlums out here. I mean, it was just, well, one, it was embarrassing for me as a coach, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, you know, it looks like I have no control over these girls. But but yeah, just letting them know, like, hey, you have a whole team of girls that look to you when bad times happen in a game, and I can't have you do that but expect the other girls not to do that. So, you know, after that, she definitely understood. She, you know, she apologized and she was embarrassed, and she wrote a letter to the school, the other school actually. So, you know, it really hurt her pride, but so being honest with her was, you know, helpful, because, you know, it was something that, yeah, I didn't like. So, you know, just, you know, as much as you can frame and be positive how you say things, you know, they also want you to be honest with them. They don't, you know, I don't know. It was just a crazy situation, but I definitely was completely honest with her and told her that, you know, if she was going to act like that, then she wasn't welcome in my program. So I think that kind of, um, you know, woke her up a little bit.
Mhm.
So that was probably the biggest one, I guess.
Well, you kind of bring up the idea then that you might end up taking over a program where who knows what standards were put in place before you got there, who knows what the reputation is, or, you know, you might have a girl or a guy who was, you know, the so-called leader, you know, and it's their senior year, but they were never a leader really. And
Yeah.
you may have to rebuild and start over, and you may be in those tough situations like you were, where you might have to have those real honest conversations. And then I think as a coach, it really comes down to, you know, what is it that you're going to stand for, and like what are you going to really tolerate in your program. And that if you are really serious about those standards and those certain qualities, then you'll have to have those real serious conversations, and hopefully they go the way that you want them to. But like I just mentioned, you kind of never know what you're
Yeah.
taking over.
Right.
And so I guess I'll kind of follow that up within your current position then. Sounds like things are going really well in this current position and in the roles that you took over. And so did you find that you were needing to correct much in this current position, or is it more so like, hey, like, you know, things are going, you know, pretty well, and I just maybe need to, you know, tweak a little things to get some leadership? Or how is that process kind of going from your previous position to this one?
So it's definitely, you know, this program is significantly more successful. So, you know, we have that going for us. I've, you know, heard through the grapevine that, you know, there were some issues last year between players. But right now, since it's per, you know, Indiana High School Athletic Association, we're only allowed to go twice a week for 2 hours. And right now, a lot of our, well, not a lot, but a handful of our better players are currently playing soccer. So the dynamic that I've heard is, you know, kind of unsteady. I haven't seen it yet because they aren't in practices right now. So I don't know what I'm walking into right now. It's been pretty good, but again, you know, I'm here, you know, not that I have to rebuild a program, but, you know, I set very high expectations for how, you know, girls behave and things like that. And I make it very clear, like, I would love to have you as part of my program, but I don't tolerate, you know, certain behaviors. So, you know, as much as I want you as part of my program, I care more about the foundation that we're laying out for,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the players now and the younger players and our feeder programs that look and watch our program. So, you know, yes, love to have you, but not gonna deal with that. So it'll be interesting once soccer season and the fall sports seasons are over, and more of our players and those returning players start coming to things. So might have to have another podcast.
The follow up about the part
Yeah.
two of what
Yeah.
happened here. No, that's funny. And but a couple coaches I've talked to have brought up that point though that you're kind of alluding to, which is when you're taking over a program, you don't want to necessarily maybe assume anything, and you want to make sure that you're very clear about your expectations and very clear about the things that you stand for, because who knows what was put in place beforehand, or
Yep.
who knows what either you might emphasize that somebody else didn't emphasize. And you might have players, any coach listening who's taken over a new program might have players who had the same coach for 2-3 years and now they have you, and there's just a process with that. So
Yep.
hopefully all that goes well, and like, I'm happy that's been good news so far.
Yeah.
Now, the last question with this in regards to leadership is, I know that not many, but there's some coaches who they might wonder, like, okay, we're gonna build leadership, and we're gonna talk about all these great qualities and everything during the practice and off season and off the court, but what benefit am I really gonna see on the court? What is this going to actually translate to on the court? So I'm curious from you, what do you notice on the court, whether it's in practice or during games, when those leaders are really shining and demonstrating that leadership?
I would probably have to say, especially in a game, is when the times are tough. My high school coach always used to say, like, it's basketball is a game of runs. We're going to go on a run. We're not going to shut a team out. And, you have to be able to, we've had our run. Now, they're going to have a run at some point in the game. And how you respond to that is going to be, the telltale of the game. So probably when times get tough in a game is when I think most leaders will kind of take over, whether they know it or not. If the offense is crazy and everybody's just kind of running around, nobody knows what's going on, which girl is going to take the ball and get everybody organized and then, restart. So,
Mm-hmm.
Whether they know they're leading or not, it's just something like, whenever the times that get tough in a game, or, at a practice, if, they're just consistently, messing something up, or it's like one or two players, it's, what girl is going to pull them aside, or, kind of talk them through what's happening. So definitely in a game, it's, when the times get tough, who's gonna lead us to victory, I guess, for lack of better words.
Well, I really, really, really like that. I really agree that it's the player who's gonna, kind of step up and really kind of take the reins in those moments. And I know that for me personally, and I'll let you speak on your experience of that. I know for me personally that one of the things that I struggled with, and I still do, but I'm a little bit better because I've identified it, is that I would talk too much in those situations. If things got, difficult, or things, were getting down to a stressful type situation at the end, it was me who was doing a lot of the talking and a lot of the, so-called leadership. And what I found was I wasn't really letting my players kind of develop that on the court, because I was kind of taking that opportunity away from them, because I was doing, all of the talking and all of the leadership type ability, I suppose, away from them. Is that something that you are thinking about? Is that something that you had to deal with yourself, or have you always been pretty okay with, in those moments, it's the players' time, and they need to be listening to each other and hearing from one another?
It Yes and no. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of depends, I think, of who's on the floor. If
Mm.
because there might be a girl that, yes, she can lead by example, but when she talks to her teammates, she's talking at them. So,
Ah.
it's not really going to help anybody. So I definitely want to hear them like, hey, this is what we're seeing over here. What's it look like out there for you? And, if they have a plan or they see something that's open, then we'll figure it out. And kind of run with what they're doing. I'm not saying I let them just go out there and play street ball, but you know, everything looks different. You know, I'll see something different. My assistants will see something different, and the girls on the court will see something different. So, you know, just with certain ones on the floor and, you know, asking them, and I think giving them a sense of ownership of what's happening, I think that also builds a better relationship, you know, going back to that, builds a better relationship with you and your players, because they're like, oh gosh, she trusts me right now, you know, like she wants to hear me. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, letting them kind of talk through it, or, you know, in huddles or time, or you know, free throws, you know, getting them to huddle and kind of, you know, get their heads back in it, and asking them for their opinion. I think that's really big.
Yeah, I think that it's a great balance and part of the relationship piece of kind of just knowing the situation. And like you mentioned, you know, okay, if everybody's looking up to this player, like what is this player going to be saying to them at the
Yeah.
moment? Are they, you know, communicating the most effectively, and are they giving, you know, the best possible words that that player needs to hear? Because, you know, we know the way that we are going to talk to each of our individual players, but I think sometimes, you know, the ones that we designate as our leaders, they might not necessarily know how to communicate the, you know, the message properly to each of their teammates in a way that is going to get them to where they need to be. And so I think that that's also something important to mention. And a follow-up question that came to mind as you were talking was that we can give this responsibility and kind of give a little bit of that ownership to our leaders, but as we know of basketball, things don't always, you know, work out the way that we want them to. And, you know, we might say, hey, like, this is what we're going to do, and, you know, go out there and I'm giving you this power to lead, and it might not work out the way that they want to. They might lose a game, or, you know, they might not get the opportunity or the shot that they wanted. So have you had situations where you've had, you know, you've given leaders an opportunity to lead, and maybe they fell short, and, you know, they're taking it personally, or they're taking it on themselves? Is that something that you've had to deal with, and how are those conversations like with those players, if you have?
Yeah. So probably the biggest thing, you know, and, you know, if they do take it personal, for me, that shows me that they care, and, you know, that they are kind of taking, you know, putting the team before themselves and saying like, dang, you know, I messed up, or, you know, whatever they're telling themselves. However, you know, I'm big on like why. And, you know, kids are always like, well, why would I do that? Why am I doing this? So that's, you know, if something happens and it doesn't work out, you know, I try to talk them through why it didn't, or, you know, what we could have done, or whatever. And I never say, you know, you never want to put it on them, because you're the coach. So, you know, I'll always be like, hey, that's my bad. Next time, this is what we'll do. Or, you know, and just kind of talk them through, yes, I saw what you saw. However, maybe you could have, or maybe we could have done this differently, or something, so that, you know, they're understanding what happened and why. So then, you know, maybe the next time they're put in that situation, they're like, oh, this is what coach was talking us through. This is what happened, and this is what we're going to do this time. So because I know that's really, especially girls, you know, they overthink everything. So as much as I can tell them why
Mm-hmm.
something happened or didn't happen, I think that will better prepare them for the next time, if there is a next time that they're in that situation.
And since you are one that considered yourself to be more of a leader and taking that leadership responsibility when you were playing, was that something that personally worked for you? If you can reflect back and think back to when you were playing, is that the way that you would like to have been communicated with? Is that how you were communicated with when you dealt with those sort of situations?
Well, that's definitely not how I was communicated to.
Yeah.
um, but, you know, I can, you know, think about tons of situations now that I'll replay in my head, like, gosh, Shelby, if you would have just done this differently, or had you done this 2 plays before, you know, the situation would have been like this. So there are definitely times where I'm like, okay, I need to, because I'm a visual learner. So, you know, I need to be able to, I play things back in my head, and I'm like, gosh, if I would have just done this, that would have worked, or that's why we did that instead of this. So,
Hmm.
you know, as much as, you know, I say the girls are big why people, I am too, this is why it didn't work. So that's kind of how I would take a game and think about it and say, okay, well, that's why that happened. So, next time I'm put in this situation, this is what I'm going to do, or this is how I'm going to react. So.
And I think that's really helpful. I know it's helped a lot of my players as well, is just seeing it and like being able to, whether it's seeing film or, if they ask why, then, well, here's this film, here's why.
Yeah.
Here's why,
Yeah.
we should have done this and not done this, and just being aware, like we talked about with the relationships and how you communicate with them, and understanding that, I know for me, there are certain players who I won't really say a word to after like a tough loss, because they're just not with it, and they're not going to be listening to me anyway. And there's a couple players who they're in the right mindset possibly to have a quick conversation about it, but just making sure that, like we talked about, that it's positive, because emotions, depending on the game, can run a little bit high, and understanding just what's going to work best for them. And like we talked about with film, film doesn't lie. Film is great at explaining things and showing things. So it could be it could be your best friend. Well, yeah, this was great. I know that we could have talked for much longer just about this topic, but to wrap up, what I would like to do first, Coach, is, and you mentioned a great one earlier, but is there a coaching moment of yours that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
I would probably, and it's not like one moment,
Mm-hmm.
but just kind of going into, like I said, I was, the team that I had last year they were an 0-40 team. They hadn't won a game in 3 years or 2 years. And really, if you can show players that you care and that you're human, like, they will run through brick walls for you. So that is probably my biggest thing. If you want to build a program, you want to set your expectations, follow those expectations. And, last year I told them, I said, I only need five girls that are bought into what we're trying to do here. I know nobody wants to play a game with 5 people, but I said, all I need is 5. And, that kind of set the tone for the rest of the season. Like, hey, coach is serious. She only needs 5 players. So, I need to show her that I'm here. So just letting them know that you care and you're setting those expectations because you care. I think it will do wonders for your program as a whole.
Yeah. And just to add with that, because I 100% agree, those are the types of characteristics as a coach that, if you embody those and you show those, those are the ones that create those long lasting relationships and all the things that will, stick with the players well beyond basketball. And you mentioned before about your idea of, teaching through basketball, and just all the other skills and all the other, things that you want to communicate. And, we talk about, players being leaders, but us being leaders and us being role models and modeling all of those, positive behaviors or behaviors that they'll need later in their life. And so 100% agree. I really like that a lot. And now to wrap up, Coach, what I give every guest is I give them what I call like my 60-second soapbox, but feel free to go longer if you need to, where they can give out their final thought, their final idea, kind of their closing message that they would want our listeners to hear. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor, Coach. Go ahead.
All right. Really I just remember why you got involved in the game to begin with. Obviously, who doesn't love to win and who doesn't hate to lose? But it is so much more. And, I don't have this yet because, I'm still young and haven't been through programs where I have, adults already. But, time and time again, you'll hear a coach say the best thing about coaching is, when you have that player from 10, 15 years ago, call you up and want to catch up on their life because you were that big of an influence on them. So, for me, I always try to coach with, my experiences. Why did I want to play basketball, and why did I enjoy coming to high school basketball and, supporting and coming to practice and things. So just remember why you fell in love with the game and, coach with that. No, don't worry about, yes, you want to worry about the wins and losses, but it is so much bigger, as I said, you want to teach through the game, not for the game, because it is so much bigger than basketball. And, as much as we can influence and develop good people, because our world is lacking good people right now, as much as we can influence and develop good people that will hopefully go on and do big things in our crazy world right now, is just really what it's all about. So building those relationships, teaching through the game, not for the game, and just remembering why you fell in love with the game to begin with. So
Well, I really, really like that, because that's such a guiding question, I think, for life in general. What is your why? Like, what is your
yeah,
purpose? Why are you coaching? And why am I
right.
coaching? Like, what is your why? And I think once you know what the why is, then it's a lot easier to think of the how you're going to do something once you have that guiding purpose of why you're doing something. And like we talked about, hopefully it's for the kids and for the players and all of the things that you're teaching through basketball. And I think if that's your why, then you're going to have those phone calls 10, 15 years after your players leave, where they excitedly tell you about all the great things that are going in their life. So I really like that, the whole idea, what is your why, I think is always something we could reflect on. And this was great. And so Coach, I want to thank you for spending some time talking about leadership, talk about developing leaders, all the things involved with leadership and the experiences you had both playing and both coaching in some of your unique situations. Really informative, really entertaining, and I really appreciate it. So Coach Gliebe, I want to thank you again. Good luck going forward. Hopefully your team gels and meshes together and everything goes great with that, and that you can safely play this upcoming season. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. This was awesome. Anytime you can talk about basketball, it's a good conversation, right?
Win-win. Anytime I get to talk, coach, teach basketball, teach in general, absolutely. 100% agreed. Thank you so much. And for all of you listening, thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We'll see you guys next